we're going to do a little bit on importing into FBS. And there are several types of data you can import into FBS. And I don't really have a slideshow for this. We're just going to kind of talk about it and kind of show you the different options that you have through the live program. And what I like to say is anything that you can get in Excel, I can import into FBS. When we're talking about what we can import, we can do any kind of feed imports. We can do your Packer imports. Packers are a little more complicated than just a spreadsheet, but the rest of it is pretty easy. So we have feed imports. We have crop data imports. That can be applications. It can be harvests. All that can come in. And then we have our transaction plus imports, meaning you could, and people do import large spreadsheets of checks, deposits, APs, ARs, whatever they might be. Payroll is a big import we bring in through Transaction Plus. And we do have all these specialized modules for bringing in the different types of data into FBS. And if you look at these commercial mills or these feed mill interfaces that bring in from specific mills, we have a bunch on here. These go back quite a ways. And what we were finding is a lot of these, these mill softwares update their software annually, like we update ours, and we don't keep apprised of their changes they make unless a customer lets us know. And it's very time consuming to update all these types of different mills that we used to import from. And so in most of our import processes, we now have a user mapped option, and this is in feeding, in the feed mill imports, and in the crop imports specifically, that you build your own, you get an Excel file from whatever source, and then you build your own mapping in FBS to bring the data in. And this is kind of where we've moved in the last few years to be more user mapped instead of trying to keep up and put in, program changes every time every mill software or every tractor monitor had to update to their software. So we have this, this is our commercial mill import, and you could do a user mapped, and then you also have in the crop option, you have a option for mapping your columns for both harvest and application data. And we still have some of these, and then some of them still work, some of them work with some massaging of the data, but more and more we try to go to this just straight column mapping. And it seems to be a lot easier and straightforward. And you bring in, for Transaction Plus, we use the column mapping as well. So we're going to kind of focus on that column mapping. Just know that the other options are available to you, and those are, specific file formats that we do import. But we're going to kind of focus on the column mapping types of imports and what kind of data you need to have in them. And there's some data that is universally needed across all types of imports, Transaction Plus, Smart Feeder, Crop. Universally has to be there, no way around it. And that is your date, a number for it, call it a transaction ID, ledger account, center. I guess the ledger account is basically mostly for your Transaction Plus, but I think everything needs a center. And then if we're talking Transaction Plus, you need a dollar amount. If you're talking crop input import or feed import, you probably have a quantity in there instead of a dollar amount. And then you always need a file type on importing of the Transaction Plus. You don't need the file type for crop audit or feed mill though. When we're doing any of these imports in, if it is a setup related to a setup file, such as a ledger account or center or a vendor or a division. Those do have to be exact matches. When we're talking about fields, those do not have to be exact matches, and ingredients do not have to be exact matches either. You just start building this data set within Excel, and you can import it. I mean, a lot of these things have export options into Excel, and then so you bring them, you open them in your Excel file, and you might have to add just 1 or 2 columns, and we can help you set up templates to do that. So the first one we're going to do is we'll walk through all 3 types of major imports. We're going to do right now, though, we're going to do the transaction plus import. So I'm just going to scroll this down a little bit here just so I can pull up my setup files. We're going to use a date of today, though. We're going to call it transaction 101. We're going to pick a ledger account we're going to bring this into. So we do need to have the exact ledger accounts. We're going to make this a check, so we do need to have an expense account as well as our checking account on this one. So we'll scroll down here a little ways, and I'm just going to pick $6.51 for meals. Check your deposit, so we do need to have it as 2 lines, double-sided transaction. So I am going to find my bank account while I'm in here. We're going to use 001 is my ledger for that. Now we have to have our center. Close that. Again, this has to be exact, so I'm just going to go here. We're going to use 0 unallocated. We're going to write a check for $50. Check, so it's a C. I'm also going to add a description just so we can know what it is. We'll add a division just to make it happy. Okay, we're going to use division, division 0 as well. Okay, so we have the date, we have a transaction ID, we have our 2 ledger accounts for double-sided entry, center, dollar amount, our file type is a C for check. We have a description and a division. And then we're just going to save this. I'm going to choose a location. We're just going to pick my desktop for now. You name it, and we are going to choose the comma as a limited CSV file just because it seems to work better than Excel sometimes, and every Excel file can be saved as a CSV. Okay. So I do have to close this so it will import it. We'll just see if we have it set up right. I go to import data. We're going to use transaction data. It's a check. We're using, it says import export type. We're going to use import TA plus data. I am using a comma delimited file. I do want to search for that file. So I just have to go out to my desktop. And then I find my file on my desktop. Okay. We're going to go over here to set up import columns. And if you've set this up once and you're using the same file, at least the same headers across the top, then you don't have to do this again. You just use the same setup here. We are using a comma delimited file, so we do use the second column in from the left. And let's go through. So date, it tells me right here, this is what's reading off my file. So I have date, I have number. Why did I forget vendor? We'll add vendor number 9 here in a minute before we import it. I'm just going on down the line here. It's telling it what column to look in for each of these options. I'm going to save that. I do want to come back out here and fix my file because I just completely forgot about vendor. It's best if you do have this directly off the vendor list. So I'm just going to come over here and fix any vendor here. Vendor 11 will work for me. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay. We'll close that. Okay. Oops. Trying to scroll this down. There we go. So I have my file. We did our setup import columns over there already. I do want to create, come over here, it says, do you want to save data? That's great. I do want to create a transfer report just so I can see it. And then we'll click on transfer data. And it didn't, it says it couldn't find my ledger, so it rejected it. This is where it says it has to be exactly as it shows in there. I'm not sure what one it didn't find, because we can see right here, it brought me in my entry vendor 11 to account 651 for meals for $50, and I called it test. It must not have liked my second one for my bank account, because it did bring it in as an adjustment entry, and it should have brought it as a two-sided check. So that tells me right there it didn't like my bank account that I picked, and I'm wondering if it one thing I gotta be careful of, it truncated my 001 to just a 1 there. I gotta change my format here of my cell so it keeps it as I type it. And it should save. Okay. It has to be exactly as it shows in FBS, or it will not find it. We've already done everything. We fixed it. So we're going to try one more time. All it's saying is it found it because I imported it with once with the incorrect thing. But here we find that by correcting that number to 001, it did bring it in. I brought it in as a check, two-sided, 2 lines, two sides of the check. So you can do this. You can have something set up within Excel if you're really good at templates. If you bring in, like, people download their bank statements and then they have some mapping, and I don't know all this stuff, but there's a way to do some lookups and mapping with an Excel, where if you have a certain vendor, it maps it to a certain ledger account, or you can go through and put in your ledger accounts and create big files to import into FBS. This can also be done with payroll. Centerpoint payroll comes directly in, but if you have other types of payroll, you might have some Excel files that you can import in and would set up in a similar format to bring them into the program. Okay. We're going to go back to an Excel file, but this time we're going to use Excel, and we're going to create a crop import. So this is probably the most frequently time I do mapping is a lot of crop data. And I bring it in, even if you have one of the options that we have is a crop import. A lot of times there's a lot of extra data points there. There can be thousands and thousands and thousands of data points in some of those monitors. And it's just easier to bring it in through Excel. So again, I do a date. So we're going to do a harvest one here. So we're going to do how many acres. And we're going to do dry bushel and moisture and field. And 500 acres. And we're just going to do, I don't know, 1,000 or 13, and we're going to field 1, 2, 3. Okay. And we're going to save it as a CSV file. And then you get your import. and import crop data. And we have your date range. We have CSV files selected here. We have harvest data and we have column mapping. And then I just need to tell it where the file is again. And let's save it to my desktop. We're gonna save it back to my desktop there. I'm gonna have to go back and come back in because it's not picking up the file I just set out there. Okay. That's all kinds of them now. Pick here, my crop import CSV. Click OK. It's going to say, do I want to check my column maps? And I do. And hopefully you can see it around that green. I apologize. So on the left is the columns it found on my sheet, and then I need to map it to what I want to bring in the crop import. So I map date to date, acres to acres. Dry bushels comes down here to dry quantity. And then I come back down here again for harvest moisture. And then I map the field to my field description. And I click on save. And it tells me there's one value that's not mapped, which is great because I have one line on there. I am so sorry. If I can move this bar, it'd be great. Not able to move that down. So right now what it is it doesn't know what field to map it to. So at this point I do need to map my field. So I click on field map. There's a bunch of old ones in here, but I'm looking for the one that does not have a project associated to it because that tells me that it hasn't been mapped. It happens to be line 2 right here. So I'm going to pick my my production center. And if you have a project, you would map it to the projects. If you don't use projects, this would map it to just a specific field, but the field will map it. The project will map my field for me here. And then I pick where I'm harvesting it to, and I save. And then up here, it's really hard to see. I apologize, but it has all the data in it, and it tells me that what I'm pulling in here is 5,000 acres, 13% moisture, 12,000 bushels. So I click on batch import. And then if I go check my harvest records, that will come in as a harvest record. Just pull up the harvest here. And here's my harvest record that when I mapped it to Center 161 and then this project, I brought it all in. So that's as simple as your harvest records need to be. Your application records are the same. You could have, what you would have instead of your dry bushels and moisture is you would have application, oh, I can't think of the word, what you're applying. So a chemical name, you map it so it doesn't have to be exact. Chemical or seed name would be one column. We can do that really quick here. So we can say variety and application rate is best, I find. So we're going to just do variety 1, and we're doing 30,000 seeds per acre. I could keep the same field, same acres. And I save it and close it and go back in to my crop import. This time though, I'm choosing application data. I still come over here. I still put the little check mark right there. Tells me I have to map, and I do because I need to do my my variety here, my seed variety. I choose description 1 right here. And then for my rate, I actually like to choose right here my application rate and application units because I am applying it as kernels. So that's my application unit. I'll save it. And it tells me I have 2 values unmapped. I do my application map. And right here is the one we have because it has unknown. So we know that's the one that's not mapped. So we're doing a seed application and we're mapping it to whatever seed 1 stands for. We'll just keep it as alfalfa. And then this is the application type over there. And then let's make sure our field map looks fine. Our field map still looks fine. That's fine. I'm good with that. We do a batch import. Come back up here. Search my crop entries. And this time I'm doing a plant seed. My application units must not have calculated correctly within that setup of the seed because it has me a huge purchase quantity. That if your seed set up right, that application rate of 30,000 seeds per acre should have been right. If it was like for bags, it should have divided it by how many seeds are in a bag and gave me my purchase quantity. But that seed just happened to be set up a little funny, but brings it right in. So I hope you see how easy it is to build or export out of any of your crop monitors or anything that brings you Excel file with your applications or harvests. And with very, especially in the crops, very little manipulation of the data, and you can import that in pretty quickly. The last one you can do import in is a feed. And it's a little more in setup wise. There is some mapping that is involved there. So it's not something I can demonstrate in the remaining time we have like 20 minutes left. But no, that is possible. What it is though, there is a preference there and you tell it that, like column A is your date, column B is your ticket number, column C is your group ID, column 4 is your ingredient, 5 would be quantity, and 6 would be a dollar amount. Something along those lines. It's a preference. You set under utility set preferences. Usually I set that preference up for you. You don't do it yourself. It's some letter coding. It's just not something that the users need to worry about. So you give me your Excel file and then I map it according to that. And then you have this Excel file with everything in the column. So column 1's all dates, column 2 is all your ticket numbers. And you map it just like a normal commercial mill import, telling it that ingredient 1 on your import equals soybean meal, ingredient 2 equals corn, or whatever it might be, and then it just pulls it in, and it can create your AP, your AP for the feed invoice, so you can pay the feed vendor back, and then it applies it to the group, just like a normal commercial mill import. I will say that for most of our commercial mills, though, there's like 2 or 3 major ones that we do stay really up to date with in FBS. And so those do come in pretty good. And if there are changes that we have a good relationship with them and we're usually aware of those changes. So I do use, excuse me, the CSV user mapped a lot, but if you use Feed Office Pro, it probably works. I mean, that's a mill we do a lot with. And so that stays pretty up to date. A couple other ones that are pretty well, are still working well up here would be one other one. Agtronics, we have a lot of Agtronics versions. Most of the Agtronics still work coming in. And then some of the older feed mill, if you have the older feed mill manager software, that will work as well. Some of these other ones in here, like Illini Feeds, Agris Feeds, Student Gay, Hubbard, those have not been kept up to date. So if you have any kind of feed imports for those, we probably bring them back to this user mapped at this point in time. And I am so bad about checking chats. I'm so sorry, Luke. If you don't see that as an option, that means that you have not purchased that module. Luke was asking if you don't see the input, import, export data, TA plus import as an option, that means you have not purchased a transaction plus import module. If you need that, if that seems like something you'd want, we can, Doug's in the room here, I can have him give you a quote for that, send you a quote when he gets back in the office. That's basically what I had for import. I just want to make it very clear that we can still about import anything. So if you have data from grain carts, if you have data from any kind of data collection port on a tractor of any kind, you know, monitors, spray machines, monitors. I haven't met one recently that doesn't have an option to export it. Some of your John Deere equipment, they tried for a while to be more proprietary with their data, but I think even now it all comes out in Excel.